we are having a conversation today with some friends of ours from the American Catalog Mailers Association, the ACMA. The ACMA is one of 7 associations that was part of a coalition that filed a stay against the US postal hike that was proposed. Today, I am joined with Hamilton Davison, President and Executive Director, Paul Miller, Vice President and Deputy Director, and Lynn Noble, Vice President of Industry Affairs. Actually, we're going to start today with Lynn, who was with the USPS for 40 years. So Lynn, looking back at what has happened in the past year plus, and as it affects the proposed hike, could you give us a little background on how we got to where we are right now?
Well, thank you, Sammy. One of the big issues that's facing marketers today is the fact that in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of a period when everyone's business has been stressed to the max, and the last thing that anyone needs is a period of additional uncertainty, the Postal Service has now been authorized to and given permission by the PRC to raise rates at a rate that is much higher than the original amount that were established under PAEA. The Postal Accountability Act had ensured that mailers would have predictability and stability and the ability to plan their budgets each year, that there would be a cycle of rate calculations made against CPI. And that has now been totally thrown out the window. CPI is only one element of the authority that they've been given now, in that they're going to initially be given authority to raise by CPI, as well as a density factor, which in essence rewards the Postal Service that the more volume they lose, the more they can raise rates to compensate for it. They are also giving them some authority to raise rates based on the amount of monies that they see necessary to continue funding the retiree benefits and the healthcare benefits. And so all of this together is coming at a time when no one needs any additional pressure put on them. The authority was given by the PRC last year prior to the impacts of the pandemic. They went in and looked at the situation, and they determined that here's where the Postal Service looks to be financially. Here's what we think is going to be needed. Here's the lay of the land. And so we're going to try to fix this all in one fell swoop. So they came out with these recommendations, and the new PMG has given all indications that he intends to use the full authority. So with that calculation, the class of mail that catalogers and periodicals are in, we've been considered underwater for a while because of the cost overruns. And so in addition to all those other new factors that have been added in, we've also got an additional 2% hit every time that they raise rates in an attempt to try to catch up with what they intend to, or they perceive to be the actual cost of processing our types of mail. So all of these authorizations were put in place before anyone realized what the conditions were going to be today. So today, instead of the Postal Service being billions of dollars underwater for the fiscal year, they're actually pretty flush with cash. They're in a better cash position than they've been in the last 10 years right now. They have more cash on hand, yet they're intending to try to implement this full rate authority. And we have mounted an effort with other associations and with all of our members and everybody within the industry to try to apply pressure to convince the Postal Service that this is the worst possible time to throw in an additional rate hike, and that by implementing a rate hike, they're going to drive mail out of the system even faster than it would be going organically. So this is where we are today. We're looking at the potential for, as you said, as much as an 8.5% rate hike. We're not sure exactly what the final number is going to come in, but it looks like it's going to be anywhere from 7 to 8.5%. And no one is budgeted for this. And this is coming for marketers at a time when they're getting into their fall planning. They're by and large, their fall planning's been done, and they're getting ready to go into their ordering and planning season for distribution of their catalogs or their mailers. And no one's budgeted for this. And it's too late for them to turn back. They've already ordered merchandise. Many times that merchandise has been imported. So they've got all of these things in motion, and now they're going to have to eat a potentially 8% increase. So we don't know what the full impact is going to be after the peak season of the holiday, but we look for a total nosedive. And again, because of the way this authority has been structured, if their volume does nosedive, they get even more authority to raise rates even higher. So this is something that's unheard of in any industry.
Right. So that kind of is a great segue to my next question to Hamilton. So Hamilton, as running the ACMA, you were one of 7 associations that filed an initial stay on the price increase. And that, can you talk a little bit about that stay that was filed, where we are now with that, and what you foresee may happen in the next month or 6 weeks?
Sure, Sammy. Yes, thank you. When the PRC came out with its decision, many of us believed that they exceeded their statutory authority under the Postal Accountability and Enhancement Act, PAEA, which Lynn referred to earlier. That legislation placed a cap on postal revenues equal to the CPI under the belief that you can't have an unchecked government monopoly. There has to be some countervailing pressure against anything really. And in the case of a company in a marketplace, you obviously have marketplace pressure. The Postal Service as a monopoly doesn't have any such thing. So the CPI cap was selected as an appropriate and fairly usual way to regulate a government monopoly. You have public utility commissions at the state and local level that put caps effectively on monopoly providers of electricity and gas, natural gas. And similar here, the thought process was the rate cap would bring a little cost side discipline to the Postal Service, that they have to manage their costs a little more effectively. The result of that is that we filed suit in the U.S. Court of Appeals. We filed with 3 other associations, and then there was 3 other associations that filed in 2 different groups, and the court consolidated all of these into one defense, or one series of plaintiffs, I should say.
Right.
And we believe that we have a good, strong legal argument behind us. We did apply for a stay of this order. The court rejected that because there was no damage, no immediate damage being done. There was a theoretical rate authority granted, but no actual rate increase. So at the point that there is a rate increase that has been granted in May, we will reapply for a stay again. And importantly, the court did not throw out our stay request,
right,
saying that it lacked merits. They just simply said there was no damage done. Unfortunately, there's no way to take rate authority out of the rate base. Once it's been implemented, there's no provision to return postage to any mailer. And so the Postal Service, if they believe they're going to lose in litigation, has a very powerful incentive to put in as much of an increase as fast as they possibly can, because of course that will compound year after year after year. And just to pick up on the authority that Lynn covered, one piece that is just crazy, in addition to the misaligned incentives with the density authority. I don't know about you, but when I was running a high fixed cost business, when we needed volume, we cut price, not raised it. This number won't be known to the industry until March of each year. And, that's well after the fact. We've already set our budgets for the year. And so we're going to get a nasty annual surprise if the Postal Service chooses to use it. each year in the middle of the year that we can only react to by cutting volumes. Most CEOs and CFOs aren't too excited about providing additional budget authority mid-year on a surprise basis. So this is also going to sour the use of mail in the minds of executives. In addition to the uncertainty of the number, just the process itself is completely wrong. In addition to litigation, we're also actively working the Hill with the hope that members of Congress can see how foolhardy this is, and also pass some sensible postal reform to address the legacy cost overhangs of the Postal Service. These are congressionally imposed cost overhangs, and we're hoping that those can be addressed by Congress, and we can have a more sensible financial outlook for the Postal Service than we have currently.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Looking ahead, what can we as publishers, as obviously folks that use the USPS to a great extent, a lot of our livelihood is based on mailings, the mailings of periodicals reaching our audience. And as mentioned by Hamilton, you know, our budgets are already in place for the year. So what can we do as individual publishers and also as vendors supporting the industry? What can we do, Paul, in terms of reaching out? Who should we contact? What are the things that we could say that might persuade the argument and persuade it so that there is a stay executed? And is that ultimately our goal? Is it just to put a stay on this and then maybe revisit it at another time? So that's a two-part question for you, Paul.
Well, let's look at the mid-year increase that's being threatened right now first.
Okay.
That could have some major damage on anybody's business, whether they be in magazine publishing or some kind of merchandise sales, anybody who relies on the mail. Because like you said, the budgets are set, and now you're going to get hit with this much larger increase that you hadn't planned on. That's going to possibly lead to pulling back some mailings, maybe not with subscription based, but anything that's optional might be pulled off the table. That's going to lead to lower sales. That could lead to layoffs. Bottom line is you need to go to Congress and tell them jobs are going to be impacted in your district unless you get up and help us here. Because the Postal Service seems to think that no matter how much they volley out in the way of postage increases, any business mailers can take a hit. But that's just not true. A lot of them went out of business after the 2007 rate hike. It was partially due to the recession from back then, but the rate hike did not help at all. It was quite a blow then, and it'll be a blow now. So the bottom line is go to your local members of Congress, whether they both on the House and Senate sides. Focus primarily on Republicans because we need more of them on board for bipartisan legislation, and but really anybody's fair game here. And the ACMA is happy to help, whether they're even if they're not our member companies. They could always contact us at action@catalogmailers.org, and we'll be happy to tee them up and help them reach who they need to reach.
That's terrific.
Yeah, just to underscore Paul's comments, there's so much power a constituent has. If you're an employer of record in a district or state, and you start talking about the impact on your company and on jobs, that's a very persuasive communication. And members of Congress hate to disappoint people that vote for them. So if you can, we all can raise a lot of noise with Congress. I think it's possible to get something done, but it's not an easy task. So we need literally hundreds and thousands of companies reaching out and communicating what a bad idea this really is.
Right.
It's also important to always keep in mind that although there are plenty of members of Congress who have staffers who are all over postal service issues, they're not they're not necessarily in sync with the kind of damages that we just laid out here to the mailing industry itself. They may know what the Postmaster General has been going around with his 10-year plan, and they may think it's a good plan, they may not, but they're not privy to the specifics of how postage increases and of course the unreliability of service of late can really hinder a business, whether it be in publishing, merchandise sales, whatnot.
Of course.
Yeah, I was also going to add in that in the current political environment, I worked for the Postal Service for nearly 40 years. And this is the first time since I started back in 1970 that I've ever known the Postal Service itself to be so politicized. It started during the last election, and there was a lot of misinformation that went on. Regardless of how it came to this point, I think everyone understands that it's been a somewhat adversarial relationship between, especially the Democrats on the congressional side and this Postmaster General. So this is one of the reasons why it's important for us to reach both Democrats and Republicans, because if all he hears is from Democrats who he already may have an adversarial relationship with, he may not be as inclined to be as responsive. But we're hoping that if people from both parties express their concerns and encourage him to hold back on this middle of the year increase, that he'll have some reconsideration there, and also to give us time to work some things out. As I mentioned before, the Postal Service is flush with cash right now. A lot of these authorizations and a lot of these projections were made at a time when their cash situation looked totally different. Congress has already given them $10 billion.
$10 billion, right.
$10 billion as a form of relief for their COVID activities, and that's well and good. But they've got that plus additional funds on hand right now that they've just not been in this good a position. Yet they're intending to move forward with a rate plan that is based on a lot of these assumptions that were made prior to them being in this current situation. So it's very important for us to get all of the people who are listening to this, and all of our members and all of our associations to get in front of their Congress people with the message that this is going to kill industry. This is going to kill jobs. There are over 7 million jobs in the United States tied to the mailing industry. And they have constituencies all throughout the country who are going to be impacted, and they need to be made aware of that.
Great, great. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Lynn, Hamilton, Paul. Really great information here. A lot of takeaways. I think it's really important to reiterate that our voices need to be heard. Both sides of the aisle does not need to be, in that regard. I think we all need to be heard on this. And this is going above and beyond the CPI. This is just, it's impossible to plan for something now. But thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And we're going to make sure that all of our members know about this and pass along this information. So thank you today. Thanks, gentlemen.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.